Number 1. Hunting. I am a bit older and more recently gotten on the internet, after years of avoiding it. I've lived the majority of my life in really rural areas. In fact, in the 70s and 80s, I spent most of my time living in a really old cabin out in the hills. I listened to a lot of stories on YouTube, scary ones mostly. But the only ones that I will not listen to are ones that take place while camping in the woods. This is because what happened to me a long time ago. It is also the reason I decided to stop living in that old cabin. I didn't have much food in the house, so I had to go hunting. This was a regular excursion for me, being that I didn't often head into town to pick anything up. I knew I would be out for a few days, so I had a small tent packed as well. I hoped that I would find something on the first day, but I really didn't have any luck. During the second day, but later in the day, it seemed like a storm was heading on its way. That's the disadvantage of living without any technology. I had no idea that there was even a chance of a rainstorm. Not that it was really a huge problem. Anyone who hunts much is never scared of a little rain. However, that doesn't mean I like being rained on. I managed to be done with my day in time to get my tent put up before it began raining. There was some lightning in the sky before I finally was tired enough to fall asleep. When I closed my eyes, I heard the raindrops begin hitting the tent. At the very least, I knew that I would get a really good night's sleep. Sometime during the middle of the night, I got woken up by what sounded like a gunshot. I mean, I didn't really think that it was. There was a thunderstorm happening, and it could have just been a really loud clap of thunder. I only thought about this for a few moments before I just turned over and made myself go back to sleep. The next time I woke up, I'm not really sure what woke me up. All I remember is opening my eyes, and I found myself on my back. This was a bit weird because I always sleep on one of my sides. I was about to turn myself right back around on my side when there was a blinding bolt of lightning, which lit up the hill, and when it did, I saw someone who was standing right outside my tent. Whoever was outside my tent had what appeared to be a rifle in a holster. I turned and grabbed my shotgun and yelled at whomever was standing there that I had a shotgun. The second flash of lightning and the few seconds that this encounter took place revealed the guy quickly moving away from my tent. I grabbed my flashlight and had my gun in my hand as I quickly ran out of the tent. Flashing the light around, I looked to see if I could catch a view of the man. I wasn't able to, however. After a while, I went back into the tent. I wasn't able to get back to sleep for a while. I think I scared the guy off for good, but the whole encounter had me rattled. Unfortunately for me, I did eventually drift off again. The next day, I decided to go back to my cabin. I could probably get some squirrel close to my cabin. I'd come out for a deer, but that wasn't going to happen. There was a creek down the hill, and I usually followed that back to the cabin. I made my way down the hill. I went to get a drink from the creek, and that is when I saw the most terrifying thing I had ever seen in my life. A dead body of a young male was laying in the creek. He had a hole in his forehead, which I assumed had to be what I heard the previous night. I was immediately terrified and thought of the man I had seen outside my tent last night. Hell, he was the reason I had decided to cut off my hunting trip. I decided to hurry back to my cabin before it either got dark or I saw him again. I made it home, and then I had to get in my truck and drive into town to report the dead body. The police went out and investigated, but no one was ever charged with the crime. Whoever that man was, whoever was at my tent that night, was never caught and never paid for what he did. Number 2. Camping with Todd. My best friend in high school always tried to get me to go camping. I never liked the idea of being away from civilization, so I didn't ever go. We grew up together and were buddies since the age of 5, but when we graduated, we went to different colleges. It was weird being away from my best bud so much that during the summer following our freshman year, I finally agreed to go camping with him. No matter how good of friends we were, though, I didn't want to sleep in a tent with him, so we both got separate tents. I'm not a homophobe or anything, he just farted a lot. We found a nice camping area and parked our car. We hiked for about an hour, until we came upon a nice area to set up our tents. I really had no idea what to do, so Todd pretty much did all of the work. He set up the fire, put the tents together, and pretty much unpacked everything. Todd got some fishing poles and we went down to the lake to go fishing. It was also something that I never really did, and I have to admit that I wasn't very keen on it. Unfortunately, I was also bad enough at it that I didn't catch any fish, which in turn saved me from having to take them off the hook. After we were done fishing, Todd wanted to go on a hike. We got our backpacks on and we headed out throughout the woods. I have to admit that I like the hiking much more than I like fishing. It was good exercise, and it was fun to see nature. I was really beginning to wonder why I had ever had this huge aversion to camping. Todd stopped at one point, and I wasn't watching him, so I nearly ran into him. When I was about to ask him what was going on, he shushed me and told me to get down. When I did what I was told, he pointed off through the woods, and we saw a couple big, rugged country dudes off in the distance. I wasn't sure what they were doing, but it looked like they were cutting something with a machete. I looked at Todd, and he just shushed me and motioned for me to turn around and walk away quietly. Once I was allowed to talk again, I asked Todd what was going on. He told me he really didn't know. They might have been doing something illegal, or they might have been doing something as simple as cutting vines. He had figured it was better to err on the side of caution and just not announce our presence. We had a nice night, drinking some beer and just talking, while Todd cleaned and cooked the fish he had caught. We stayed up really late, until I was practically struggling to keep my eyes open. When Todd noticed, we just retired to our separate tents and went to bed. I had drank quite a bit of beer, so when I woke up the first time, I wasn't all aware of what time it was. I wasn't sure what had woken me up at first, but looking in the direction of the fire, I noticed some movement outside the tent. Todd had gotten up and he was putting some more wood on the fire. He had lectured me on the importance of keeping one's fire burning all night. I watched him for a few moments and felt myself drift off to sleep pretty quickly. The second time I woke up, it was because I heard another noise. It was a chopping noise, and I woke up and once again looked through the wall of my tent. I saw Todd again, off in the distance, obviously chopping more wood for the fire. I drifted off. As I was sleeping, I felt someone put their hand over my mouth. I began to panic just a little bit, before I realized that it was Todd. He had somehow gotten up and gotten into my tent without waking me. He whispered in my ear that I had to be very quiet, and to just grab my backpack, and that we had to leave to go back to the car. I was puzzled and whispered, "What about the tents and stuff?" He said we'd come back for it later, but he needed us to get to the car. Making as little noise as possible, I got up and felt around for my jeans. I got dressed quietly and grabbed my backpack, and when I was following Todd out of the tent, the first thing I noticed was that the fire had almost completely gone out. I thought that was odd, as I had seen Todd working on it twice. I slipped outside and almost fell down, but I grabbed the side of my tent in order to get my footing. Todd once again silenced me and told me to move forward. It was hell moving through the woods in the dark, and we had camped about an hour away from our car. It seemed to take much longer for us to get back. Other than the sounds of nature, I kept hearing the same chopping sounds like I had heard earlier when Todd was cutting wood. It seemed to be coming from our camp, and that was just puzzling to me. I figured maybe it was an animal or something. When we finally got to the car, Todd got behind the wheel, and I got behind the passenger seat. I figured since we were in the car and likely safe, I could ask Todd what was going on. I'll never forget what Todd told me. Todd was as drunk as I was, and when he first noticed that the fire was going out, he decided to let it. He had never gotten up, but he had woken up both times like I had. The first time, he thought maybe I had gotten up to warm up, but the second time, he heard the chopping sound, and he knew that I would not be chopping wood. He then turned on the light and told me to look at my hand. Looking at my palm, where I grabbed the tent, I noticed I had smeared blood on it. I began to freak out, but it got worse when I noticed it was on my shoes as well. Likely, it was what I had tripped in. And Todd told me he had pretended to go back to sleep the second time, and he heard a lot more noise and something being thrown on the tents. After he was sure that we were alone, he got out and shined the flashlight of his cell phone around the camp. The tents, the camping equipment, and everything was completely coated with blood. The ground was covered in it too. He told me that was when he woke me up and told me to leave. He figured it was just best to leave before whomever it was came back a third time, and the camping equipment could be replaced. He started the car, and we left as fast as he could. We never went back for anything, and we never found out what the chopping sound was. You know, really, I don't ever want to know. Number 3. Snowy. I had a white short-haired cat named Snowy for about 17 years. When I bought Snowy home, I started to see how special she was. She never jumped on countertops or tables. She could hardly meow. And she always came when I called her. She easily learned to play fetch, and would bring the ball back and drop it at my feet. Snowy loved everyone. I did daycare for 10 years during her life, and she would walk up and greet each parent and child by tilting her head and letting out chirping type noises at them, as if she were talking to them. The daycare babies loved her, and she patiently allowed some rather intentional rough play from them. She never hissed. When she had had enough, she would walk away into another room. If she said, "I love you, Snowy," she would close her eyes and open them again, as her way of saying it back. I had 2 extremely frightening paranormal experiences happen during the 17 years I had Snowy. The first happened when she was about 12 years old, and in this one, Snowy was there, but not actually directly involved. These 2 stories do not really tie in together, but I'm combining them so I can tell you both of my experiences at one time. Doing daycare, I was hyper alert at all times, not a sound sleeper. One night after the kids left, I went into my room to sleep. My bedroom door was directly off of the living room, and I left it open. I kept a lamp lit in the living room while I slept. I have never been a fan of a pitch-black house. As I slept, I instantly woke to a loud, rapid whirr sound I had never heard before. I should backtrack and say that I've had a bouncy baby seat I utilize for daycare. I'm sure you've seen them. They are a cloth seat with a strap, and in front of where the baby sits is a tray with a bar, with a lot of beads and keys for the baby to play with. And to my surprise, upon opening my eyes, the bouncy seat was in my bedroom, directly in front of my doorway. I did not remember it being there, as it would have blocked the entrance to the bedroom when I entered earlier. My eyes were settled on the cause of the whir. The keys on the bouncy seat were spinning at about 1,000 miles per hour, and they formed a colorless blur as they rotated at the fastest speed possible. I never blinked or closed my eyes. I continued to watch the keys as they spun. After about 10 to 15 seconds, they started to slow down, then stop. I was wide awake from the moment I had set eyes on them, and I began to think of all explanations. I called Snowy, thinking perhaps she somehow batted the keys, although I really didn't think this was plausible. The bar was somewhat high for her to accurately hit, and she could maybe bat one or two, but definitely not all of them at once. And besides that, she was very mellow, not prone to playing in the night. After about a half a minute, Snowy came trudging into my room from the direction of the kitchen. I knew she had not caused the keys to spin. I then tried several experiments of batting the keys myself. If I was lucky, I could get them to rotate 3 to 4 times, but that was it. And definitely not all the keys, just the few I chose. Needless to say, I was up the remainder of the night. The next day, I put the bouncy seat out in my garage, and I never used it again. The whole experience, to this day, still freaks me out. It showed me there are definitely things beyond our understanding. In this case, something I did not find to be positive. The second event happened after we moved to our new home. It was 2005 and Snowy was 17. She made her way to the basement where I found her with a drooping head, near death. I carried her upstairs to the main floor family room, where I stayed with her until 3 a.m. when she passed away. The night after she died, I went up to my room to go to bed. It was a warm night, and I had on a short nightgown, which exposed my knees. I thought, if Snowy were alive, she would be right here with me. Right after thinking that, I felt a soft brush of fur across my knees. The light that filtered in from the hallway showed that nothing was there, but I strongly knew that it was Snowy. The next and most hair-raising event happened almost a week after Snowy died. I was alone in the house, playing a game on the computer in the family room. I should preface this by saying we had no other pets or any mice in the house. As I played my Yahoo Spades game with live players online, I heard the bouncing and pinging sounds of things hitting the kitchen floor. The kitchen was tiled and abutted up against the family room. I kept playing. Then, in about 10 minutes, I again heard what sounded like pebbles, again dropping to the kitchen floor. I got up and went into the kitchen, which was about 7 feet away, and stood there. Nothing. And the floor was clean. The countertops were clear. There was nothing I could see that had fallen. I went back to my spades game. Again, about 3 minutes later, more sounds like pebbles hitting the kitchen floor, and the sound seemed to be coming from the corner of the kitchen where Snowy's cat food dish used to be, and this continued to happen roughly every 3 minutes for over 1/2 hour. There was a little typing area under the cards on the online game where you could talk with players. I typed, "I think my dead cat is trying to communicate with me." A player typed back, "Say something to her. Speak to her." I felt my hair was standing on end, and I typed, "I just can't." The player replied, "Aw, your cat loves you. Say something." I have to say that although I strongly felt it was Snowy, entering the realm of the paranormal is very unnerving, because you don't know what will happen next. It's all uncharted territory. My spades game finally ended, and I went into the kitchen, and entered the bathroom, which was directly on the other side of the kitchen. I left the bathroom door open, which gave me a full kitchen view where Snowy's dish used to be. Did I have the nerve to speak to her? I gathered up all the courage I had, and then uttered, "I love you, Snowy." Immediately, after I finished the words, it sounded like hundreds of dry cat food pieces hit the floor, as if poured from a bag, at a height of about a foot, or from above. It was a miracle I didn't have a stroke. My head tingled, I was stunned, and my senses were heightened to their peak. I could not handle this. It was just too much. I don't recall what I did after that, but the next morning, I came downstairs into the kitchen, and I heard about 3-4 more pieces hit the floor. I ignored them. I was on overload. I regret I didn't say, "Go to the light, Snowy," or something like that. But I just couldn't. And thankfully, that was the last of it. In about 5 days, I happened to open Snowy's cat food drawer, and I found 5 to 6 loose pieces of cat food at the bottom. I gathered them, held them a foot above where her dish used to be, and dropped them. It was the identical sound I had previously heard. Snowy, who shared our lives for 17 years and was as human as catly possible, had stayed in spirit for over a week in our home after dying. She wanted her presence known. Since she couldn't talk, she chose the only form of communication she knew would be associated with her, somehow causing the sound of cat food to hit the floor. She did it over and over and over until I understood. After I told her I loved her, she immediately followed with a grand finale with the sound of hundreds of pieces falling, which was her way of saying yes, yes, it is me. And although I didn't tell her to cross over into the light, I know she found her way. She made me a believer that animals do have souls that live on after death, which gives me hope for us humans crossing over too. And when that happens to me, I know she'll be waiting for me. Number 4. Ouija experience. I went on a haunted experience night, which was in a castle in Wales, where you go overnight and go around the castle, taking part in various seances or Ouija boards going on around the castle. After taking part in the first 1 or 2, the medium asked the board if there was anyone in the room they wished to speak with, and it indicated me. I didn't really take much notice of this, but when I went to another room and took part in another board, the same thing happened. The medium commented that whatever it was, it really wanted to speak with me. We asked some general questions, and then the medium asked me to think of the name of my old school and headmaster, and to think of the first letter of each to see if it would get that right. And it did, which was very unnerving. The spirit said her name was Rachel, and she said she knew me from school. She said she had died when she was 12. Now, I knew a few Rachels at school, but to my knowledge they were not dead. And I think, if someone dies at that age, while you are at school with them, either by illness or accident, it sticks with you. So I knew I had not forgotten. The medium then said to think about it sometimes, as the spirits can get a little confused. I ended up feeling very unnerved, and when we moved rooms again, I refused to take part, as I said I didn't want to play anymore. However, nothing whatsoever happened for the people playing that board. The medium turned to me, and basically said it seemed to be me it was centering around, and would I sit back in? When I did sit back in, the board became active again. After we had left the night, it was a few months later, and a friend of mine called to say on TV there was a program who was doing a ghost hunt in the very castle we had been to. So I turned on to watch. It turns out that the castle was once a girls' school, and that one of the girls had died there when she had fallen down a flight of stairs. Although it didn't mention any names or ages, this was certainly enough to unnerve me, and really made me think about the experience I had and the information the board had given me. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. I hope you enjoy these subscriber stories. I don't get the majority of my stories from subscribers, so I like to throw together a good video with stories from you all whenever I can. If you'd like to read print versions of these stories, please check out the Killer Orange Cat subreddit in the link provided. You can also take a look around at the Killer Orange Cat merchandise store. In the meantime, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the subscribe button below, or using the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Feel free to leave me a comment to let me know what you think of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter, using the links in the description. If you have a story you like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address provided in the description. My main requirement is that the story is original, meaning it has not yet been read on any other YouTube channel. And please, whatever you do, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.